everybody. My name is Shaila Sarathi, and I'm going to be the host for this panel. This is our first ever panel that we're doing on Mentor Me, and today we have with us Anusha and Prasann. They're going to introduce themselves shortly, and we're going to be talking about the social sciences, and that's super exciting, and we're super excited to have them. So why don't you guys go ahead and introduce yourselves? Anusha, do you want to go first?
Sure. So, hello everyone. My name is Anusha. I graduated TSB in 2019, and now I'm a rising sophomore at Yale. I think I'm going to study global affairs, and I think I will do a global affairs English literature double major, although I haven't fully decided on that yet, but definitely humanities oriented. And outside of class, I'm involved in the International Relations Association, as well as theater stuff, and yeah.
Hey guys, I'm Prasann. I also graduated TISB 2019. I've just finished my first year. I'm a rising sophomore at UC Berkeley, and my majors are a lot less interesting. I'm planning a double major in statistics and economics. Outside of class, I'm also involved in the Berkeley cricket team. I've been doing that since my first semester, and I love it. And I'm also involved in a couple of other Indian student organizations, including the speaker series at Berkeley. So that's what I've been keeping myself occupied with outside of class.
So I actually haven't decided my major yet, and I'm in the process of picking it, which is great. I'm talking to a lot of professors about it. I'm thinking about like what I want like my career path to look like, and like all of those important things. And I'm also trying to figure out what makes me happy and what I like, although I feel like I kind of know it's global affairs, and I kind of know that I want to work in public policy or like education policy. So now I just kind of have to like pick a major that will like lead to that.
Actually, for me, picking my major was a much, like, at least before I applied to college, picking my major was a much rockier path. I applied to a ton of different majors in completely different fields. So when I applied to the UK, I applied for law. When I applied to Canada, I applied for financial management and accounting. And the reason I finally settled on economics is because it's a great fundamental area upon which to, get into the finance and, finance side of the corporate world. And that's what I'm looking to get into for like after I graduate, maybe after grad school. So that's one of the reasons I picked economics. The other reason actually I picked economics is because through high school, I loved working with numbers. I was a math HR student. I did do well in it, but that's a whole other conversation. But I love working with numbers, and I felt, a great practical application of something working with numbers is to work in finance. And that's one of the reasons I was more inclined towards, applying for economics. And I'll also probably, shoot my shot with business, like trying to apply to Berkeley's business school and whatnot, but that's still a very fluid plan. Story time. So when I applied to college, I was, fairly set that I'm just going to do an economics degree, go in econ, come out econ, nothing in between. But in my first 2 semesters, my 2 most fun classes have been my stat classes. I took a data science class and an introductory statistics class, and both of these were really fun. They were, again, a lot to do with numbers, a lot of working with numbers. And what's unique about statistics at a place like Berkeley is how coding centric it is. So even my statistics class, above and beyond what I learned in data science, I'm fairly proficient in 2 coding languages now. So I think those 2 were the most fun for me because they were 2, subjects that I hadn't really studied in school, especially with coding and data science. I never took CS in school. So it was something new, and it's something that, really fascinated me. So that's why I actually decided to pursue a second major in statistics. So I think those 2 were my favorite classes.
Yeah, I actually had a similar story where I entered and I was like, I'm going to do global affairs, like, or I'm going to do pol-sci, like that's kind of like my thing. I was very involved in Model UN in high school, so I thought that would be like a easy path, and that's something that I was very passionate about. But my favorite classes so far have been my English literature classes, where particularly I've done like contemporary poetry, and I found that super fascinating. I also did English literature HL in high school in the IB, similar to Prasann's story. And yeah, like I kind of was like, wow, like this is something that I could really see myself enjoying and like majoring in the future. Not that I've decided yet, but yeah, those have been my favorite classes. I think that it's like difficult because I personally didn't get any like global affairs or politics like kind of like education in school. Like we didn't learn about like political theory. So I wasn't exposed to that as a real subject, as like a contemporary subject that I could study. And I kind of wish I had tried more to be like to take classes or to like do APs in those things. I know I would assume there's an AP politics thing, and I wish I had done that, or like, yeah, maybe taken some like online courses.
I think I'm one of the few people, I've spoken to since high school who has like no real regrets in terms of not taking subjects in APs. I took zero APs. I took only math and chem subject SATs. So, just for background, I took history, econ, and math at HL. And I feel, that was great because like math HL really helped me breeze through my introductory math classes in uni. History HL was just fun, and I think Anusha will back me up there. And econ again I took it for the first time.
Friends for life.
Yeah, and econ, obviously, since I was looking to pursue it as a field, so I really have nothing to say in terms of what I wish I'd taken in high school. But that said, if I wish this is more a qualm with the IB curriculum, but I wish, I had more exposure to something like stats that, like was a game changer for me at uni. And I feel if if I had a chance now, I might have taken the statistics AP. But beyond that, really, nothing I wish I had known, wish I had taken beyond what was offered in high school. I think a universal problem anyone studying an econ class, like forget an econ major, econ class at a mid to large size US university is just how little faculty seems to care. I say that in the nicest way possible. For those of you who don't know, faculty in the US carry research alongside teaching, and typically econ classes are large classes. They're in a school like Berkeley, introductory econ classes are about 400-500 people big, and intermediate econ classes, are again 300-400 students a class. So it's very difficult to interact with faculty as much as you would in a smaller program. You have to take a lot of initiative in order to like go to their office hours and whatnot, which again is not impossible, but is something that you have to take the initiative for yourself. Yeah, I think another thing, like coming back to how faculty quote unquote don't care, every econ major will find problems in their assigned problem sets where questions don't make sense, right down to midterm and final exam questions don't make sense. And I think things like that, the lack of attention to detail around students beyond their research is something that I feel econ departments across the country lack. And that's something that you have to take a lot of initiative yourself. You have to piece together incomplete piece of information in order to like study. You'll never be spoon-fed anything like you'd be used to in high school. So I think that's something to keep in mind. Other than that, I'd say one thing that really shocked me about econ in Berkeley is the math, like how math heavy it is. My intermediate econ class had, more multivariable calculus in it than econ. I'd say, when you're being told that this class uses multivariable calculus or linear algebra, don't just assume it's 5 minutes worth of multivariable calculus that you just watch a Khan Academy video, you're through it. It's not. It's pretty difficult, and the math part of my class was actually one of the most challenging for me in my second semester. So I'd say be wary of just how math and number oriented college econ can be at times.
To add to Prasann's point, even though I have no perspective of social sciences, I'm a biology major. Me and Prasann are both in the UC system, which is in California. Staying in touch with your professors is really hard. The resources are there, and especially at a big school often recognizes that like it'll be hard for students to reach professors, so they do make efforts. Like the resources are there, but at times it is difficult to reach out to faculty.
I think that in general, like I'll speak about like politics or like global, but then also like humanities in general. There's no like set career track. Like a lot of my friends are doing pre-med, so they have like a very set trajectory of what they're going to be doing for the next 10 to 15 years. And like I don't really like have that. I think I have like a lot of flexibility to like do what I want in the summers and to like explore what I want, which is also kind of like scary at times because I don't have this like I'm gonna do this, then I'm gonna do this, then I'm gonna do this. Like it's very much up to me. And even if I like declare my major as global affairs or pol sci, like I'll still have to think about what I want to do in those fields and like think about whether I want to go into like the nonprofit world or like whether I want to go into consulting or like whether I want to work on political campaigns. And like there's like a ton of options there, or like law school even, right? So I think it's like definitely like I would say the humanities are more about like what figuring out like what how you want to take advantage of resources that were given to you and like how you want to like chart your own like career and how you want to use your passions to like best map out a way, which is difficult because no one's going to tell you how to do that, but I'm finding the process very rewarding. Honestly, like the IB is hard. I don't think anyone claims it's easy. Some subjects are more difficult than others, but I would say that like all subjects you take are difficult and challenging and definitely push time management, your time management organizational skills. I do think that in terms of like balancing, like it's definitely a learning process and not a learning process that's like linear, like as in like you'll like figure things out and then you'll like have a breakdown and lose everything and then you'll like figure things out again, and it'll be like that process as opposed to like I am doing great consistently, and or at least that's how it was for me over the 2 years. And there are some times that are difficult, like more difficult than others, like March of grade 12 was really difficult for me. But I think that like learning how to balance things is something that the IB definitely like teaches you or like forces you to learn, and I think that's like really really like an important skill that'll help you in like a ton of different areas, including like college, because like organization and planning and accessing resources that will help you are all very important skills that you will use at some points, like other points in your life apart from the IB. So I think it's important to do work, obviously, but I also think it's important to tap out at times and be like, okay, like I cannot look at my math IA for another 2 hours. Like this is it. Like I need to take a break and then I will go back to it. Yeah.
I think similar to what Anusha said, I think the IB is not easy. I don't think anyone who's done the IB really coasted through the IB. If you did, kudos to you. Please tell me how you did it. And it's about having the right balance between when you're working and when you're not working. And I feel more than anything, what the IB teaches you is work smart, not work hard. It doesn't matter that you sit in front of your textbook for a full day. What matters is understanding where work is needed, where your strengths lie, where your weaknesses lie. A lot of self-assessment and being really self-aware and acknowledging, like I said, where are your strengths, where are your weaknesses, and concentrating as required. Beyond that, I'd say, IB have a lot of things to do, a lot of things to juggle with. Like you have your standardized testing, you have all sorts. So it's really important to, stay ahead of the ball as much as you can, use your slight lulls in schoolwork, immediately following exams or during, longer holidays to just get ahead of things as much as you can. And one thing I really learned is, never hesitate to ask for help. I think that's something that I really learned with some of my subjects is, there's always a lot of resources out there, from tutors to extra material online. And, you should just be, you shouldn't hesitate to, use any of these because they can be the difference between getting a 4, a 5, a 6, a 7, and just making the whole ride smoother for you in terms of, you know, putting you on the right path.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I definitely think that like asking for help is a really important skill, and knowing when you need help and knowing when you like can't do something. I also think it's important to like acknowledge that like everyone has different limits, and acknowledging that like you might have limits that like aren't like the same of your like best friend. And I think in college, like kind of transitioning this into college and a little bit in high school. Like sometimes people are like very proud of only getting 3 hours of sleep and like not eating and only surviving on coffee, and they're like, oh, like I'm like the midterm is tomorrow and I haven't slept in 48 hours, and people like to reinforce that, and it's kind of like a way that they're like, I'm working really hard, which is like obviously like admirable, but then just like recognizing that if you're not the type of person that can do that, and that's totally fine as well, and like you don't need to like stay up for like 36 hours. It's like not a competition over like how many hours a person studies, and like how hard, like in terms of time or like sacrifice, like everyone just has like different limits with that. And I think that's so important both in high school and in college, because especially in high school, I remember that like around board season, it was always like, oh, this person is studying 9 hours a day, this person is studying 8 hours a day. And it's kind of just like, it's okay if that's not something that's not how you process information and that's not how you learn, like that's fine. Like it'll translate you into like knowing more about yourself, and then knowing in college like how long you can physically sit in a library for, or like how long it's going to take you to write a paper, and like all of those like important things. So just like figuring out limits, asking for help, and then not being afraid to be like, I'm really stressed right now and I actually can't do this, and saying no to like activities and like things like that. Just protecting your mental health is really important.
Yeah, and I'm going to add on to it a little bit. The reason why IB is such a popular program is that a lot of people compare it to like, this is the program that helps you. This is like the program that is so similar to college, right? That's like what it's advertised a lot of the times as. And that's true, but it's really important to like take it to heart, because especially if you go to a big college, you need to know yourself well enough so that you know when you have to take breaks, when you have to stop studying, when you have to leave the library, because nobody's going to tell that to you, right? Like nobody's going to tell that to you. Actually, whether you're in a big college or a small college, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, I was going to say, it doesn't actually matter.
Yeah, it doesn't really matter. Nobody's going to be like, Shyla, please stop working. You have to figure that out by yourself. I think IB is the perfect time to do that and figure that out. Yeah.
Adding on to what Shyla said, no one's going to tell you anything when you go to college. If you're lucky, you might have a group of friends who are keeping an eye out on you, but even they, it's not their job to act like your mom would in high school. So what I'd say, the best way to avoid those 48-hour study binges, both in high school and college, is to, as cheesy as it sounds, regular consistent studying. And this is something I actually firsthand learned the value of in college. I would never do it in high school. I think Anusha would vouch for me. I would, I would be the guy who'd be up all night before the history exam, cramming historian quotes. We've all been there, we've all done that. But I think through college, I've learned just how important, consistent studying is. I see my friends now who are a lot less diligent, struggle a lot more towards exam season, midterm season, because with college, especially if you take a 4 to 5 course load a semester, you will have a paper due in a week, you'll have 2 midterms, and you'll have, extracurricular commitments that you can't get out of. It's not like school in that everything is, well spread out. Every teacher is aware of what's going on in other classes. There's no centrally set, scheme of work, deadlines, which will allow you to have, more spread out work. So I think just acknowledging that is something that's really important, and something that I learned the importance of in uni.
Both in high school and in college, there are going to be periods that are more difficult than others.
Obviously,
like months that are more difficult than others, and weeks in particular in college, like around midterm season or final season is difficult. But I think it's about like recognizing those periods and trying to do as much as possible before to like prepare yourself for that. And yeah, just like preparing is important. Like I mean, I wasn't like, I did study in advance for boards, but like everything else in the IB I did like a week before, and like I recognize that like a week before is not actually enough time
Not a
to
good
like
idea.
do things. Yeah, and it's about like taking like time and space, and like working through those periods where you have like a little lighter, because it'll like pay off in the end. I think that it's about like knowing how you're going to be tested, and then like like if you know how you're going to be tested, you can prepare well to like fit that line of testing. And like every IB subject is trying to like subliminally tell you how they want like you to like respond and like what like they want to see. And I think it's about like going through question papers and like going through like marking schemes and like understanding that. For example, for like bio, it's not as like, I took bio HL, and it's not as much about like memorizing as it is about like applying concepts. And like once you understand that they want you to like apply knowledge, like I think it makes things easier. And like for history, it's about like analyzing a situation. It's not about like going like in 1943, like they don't like they yeah have one or two facts, but it's more about like critically analyzing the situation. So I think like understand what they're testing and then like deliver on that.
And I will say, on a funny anecdote, is I remember Anusha coming home with all the question banks for biology and the mark schemes printed out about this big, and dragging them all in and just starting and going through every single question paper. But that's not what she was looking for. And what she would always tell me is that you have to look for the patterns, right? Because they've been doing this for 20 years. They're going to have patterns, and you have to look for that. And then if you find it, you can kind of exploit it and use it for your benefit, right?
Yeah, I think it's similar here. You need to understand what you're looking for, or what, what examiners are looking for, both in IB and college. And I'd say, since you guys spoke a lot about IB, I'll speak a little bit about college before going back to what worked for me and what didn't in IB. College is a lot less structured than the IB. That's something, you have to get used to really quickly, no matter where you go. You're not going to find decades worth of past papers. You won't find question banks. Even your problem sets sometimes won't have mark schemes, or answer keys. So it's really important to be, to be able to work around that in college. And that's something that I really, really learned, going into college, and something that I really, found a challenge, but something that, like I was able to adapt to quickly. Coming back to what worked and what didn't in the IP, disclaimer, most of it didn't. So take everything I say with a pinch of salt. Um, I'd say the IB only gets harder. And I learned this the hard way. You know, assessment one, end of term one, semester one exams. I didn't have too much trouble. I breezed through it. I got the grades I wanted, but it all like snowballed down from there. It was like a really, really, really big snowball hurling down at terminal velocity. Um, yeah, and I'd say, just brace yourself for that. Don't benchmark yourself with your performance in the first semester, because unless you work your behind off, you're not going to reach there. It's not something that's a realistic benchmark, especially in terms of, oh, hey, I only studied for 4 hours for term one. So if I study for 4 hours for term two, I should be fine. Not going to happen. Again, coming back to something I learned, always be open to utilizing all the resources at your disposal. If you have access to some tutors, it always, extra help doesn't go amiss anywhere. Use your teachers. I know a lot of people have a lot of problems with the ISB teachers, and I was there too. But I'd say your teachers, they're the ones who set the papers. They're the ones who mark your exams. So it doesn't hurt to understand what they want and how they want you to answer. And most times they have, years or decades of experience teaching, years in the IB. Some of them are IB examiners as well. So even in terms of, your final board exams and, thinking that far ahead, understanding what your teachers expect is not, the worst thing to do. And that's something that I learned far too late.
I also think that it's important to like recognize what's not working, and also recognize that like you need to like forgive yourself. Like a lot of studying is about forgiving yourself, and is about saying like, okay, like yes, I knew this, and yes, I didn't get these marks, but that's okay, I'll do better next time. It's about like a lot of the process is about like just being kind to yourself. That's a big part. And also figuring out if something's not working, like figuring out like that like consistently you're making the same mistakes. I did this a lot in math where I was still like doing the exact same thing over and over again, and then like I wish I had just been like more flexible and been like, okay, this isn't the way to solve the problem, so I just need to like let this go and think of another way, instead of like trying harder in this like particular like method to solve a problem.
And I'm going to jump on what Prasann said about utilizing teachers, especially with internal assignments. Again, don't know how it changed with everything being online now and all that stuff, but especially with internal assignments for me, like they are the people, your teachers, they are the ones who are grading you, right? And so going and asking them for help, asking them when they're free, showing up, like really going through drafts again and again and again. It works because they know that, oh, look, Shyla, she's paying attention, right? Like she's putting in work, and I think that has an impact on them at least.
I'm in the UC system, but my applications were, slightly more all over the place. And what I really was looking for was just come, the 1st of May when I have to commit to a college, I just wanted as much choice as possible. So I did apply to some of the UC schools. I was supposed to apply to Michigan, but I did. But that was another very similar school to the UCs. Then I also applied to places in Canada. I applied to UBC, U Toronto, Waterloo. I applied to schools in the UK. I applied to some smaller schools in the US. So for me, what I was really looking for was just a variety of options. I didn't have my mind set on, hey, I want to go to a large school. Hey, I want to go to a public school. Or, hey, I want to go to a small school or private school. And if you ask someone who's, well set in their mind before your applications go out, great. It's a great thing to be, to do that. But yeah, it's also okay to be slightly more indecisive, and it's okay to keep your options open as much as possible. So that's one thing that I kept majorly in mind. As for this process of how I applied, one thing I'd say that I learned is apply to as many schools early as you can, just because you won't have to wait until March to have an acceptance in your hand. And having that one acceptance in your hand is just like such a relief. Yeah, I didn't apply. I applied only one school ED. I was supposed to apply to a couple EA, but because I felt sick during EA admissions, I wasn't able to send those applications out. Yeah, I'd say don't leave essays for the last minute. That's the most stereotypical US college advice you'll ever get. But your essays can be the make or break of your applications. And as someone, myself, I didn't have the greatest IBPG. My PG wasn't terrible, but it wasn't what I was looking for. And I feel the time and effort I put into my essays really made the difference in some of the schools that I did get into.
I agree. So definitely knew how I like learned and how I wanted like my education system to go. So I knew that I wanted to go to like a university on the smaller side. I also knew that I wanted to be on the East Coast. So I applied to like liberal arts universities on the East Coast. Also because I wanted academic flexibility and because I did not know what I wanted to study last year, and I'm like a little more clear this year, but still like I really appreciate this time to explore, and I appreciate that I'm not on a track, which is what liberal arts schools provide. So I think I had those things in mind when I was choosing the colleges I wanted to apply to. I will say as well that if I could, like the biggest takeaway from my college application thing, like season, was that like I should have applied to more colleges early, like just to reiterate what Prasann just said, because I applied similar story to one university early and it sucks when especially if you're applying to only the US schools, when you don't get into your early, and then you have to watch all of your friends get accepted until March. And the wait from like December to March is so long and so frustrating. And like, it's just so scary because you start thinking like, you start questioning like whether like you have a future, whether like you're gonna go to college at all. That all sounds like silly things to say right now, but it's genuinely things that I was feeling at the time. So definitely like apply early. I would also agree with like start writing your essays early. I would say that like you owe it to yourself to work on your essays because you have been preparing to apply to college for like at least 2 to 3 years, and like, or at least like 4 years. Like your colleges see your grades from grade 9 to grade 12, and you've been working that hard for that long. So like you owe it to yourself to like try your best and like the final push of it, and the final push of it is your essays, because there's not much, you know, you can do in terms of standardized testing or like IG testing or like grade 9 grade 10 testing when you reach grade 12. And so yeah, I think that like definitely working on your essays, trying your best in your interviews, taking advantage of like resources in your school, like college counseling offices are all great. And I do think the silver lining here is that I walked out of the college process just like knowing much more about myself, about how I deal with stress, about the environment that I feel best in. And
Actually, adding to what Anusha is saying, a lot of times in the college process, a lot of things won't go your way. And off the top of my head, I can recall a lot of people didn't have the smoothest interviews. A few people who had some more academic interviews, especially US colleges. Like I, for one, my Oxford interview was delayed by a lot, and that really put me off. And sometimes the factors that result in you getting in or not getting in are entirely out of your control. So I think the best thing, that the process teaches you is how to deal with rejection and deal with failure. And yeah, that's something that everyone I haven't lived life long enough to understand that myself, but that's something that a lot of people down the line say is one of the most important things that they learn through this process, and that's something that I feel should not be overlooked.
yeah, I completely agree. Like I think that like it's important to recognize that like obviously Yale and UC Berkeley are amazing schools, but Prasann and I both got rejected from a ton of colleges as well. So like I think it's important to like acknowledge that side of the story as well, that while we're both very happy at the universities we attend right now, like we did get rejected. We both went through like, oh my God, I'm not going to get into a college, like thought processes. And like, yeah, I think it's like important to hear like those stories as well, because I remember being in grade 11 and grade 12 and like looking at my seniors and going like, oh my God, they got into every college they applied to. And that's probably not true, but I like genuinely did not know that, because like I feel like we don't talk about that as much.
Yeah, I think that's a particularly dodgy question, because as of now, I don't know where I'm going to be a month from now. Because yeah, with all the uncertainty, I don't know, head or tail of what's going on. So 5 years from now, 2 years from now is a long way away. That said, I think, what college teaches you is just how to adapt yourself. You know, I can tell you with reasonable sureness that I'm not the same person I was 12 months ago, even, coming out of high school, a freshly minted TISP graduate. I'm a very different person now. And I think succeeding in what the world is coming to now is all about reinventing yourself and, just being as adaptable as possible to be able to take whatever the world throws at you. And that's something that I feel will, serve me reasonably well no matter what path I choose to take. And that's something that I feel, is something that everyone should be prepared to, no matter what field you're going into, whether it's a very conventional field or whether it's an ever-changing field. The world is now going to always metamorphosize in a few years. And yeah, you're not going to be stagnant in one place for decades like our parents were, for example, or their parents.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think that's so important. I also think that like I know this doesn't answer the question, but it's a good piece of advice where like I think choosing a mentor that like is doing things in the field that you're doing or like that you want to do is like really important, because you realize that like you don't like, yeah, a lot of life is about like finding your own path, but it's also like easier to see where someone is and go like, oh, that sounds cool, I would really want to get there, and then like reaching out to that person and like allowing yourself to like be mentored and take advice, because oftentimes like the path that you're trying to take is charted and like you don't have to do it all alone, and that just comes back to like taking advantage of resources and like asking for help.